Gorchin. Have you never looked at that Gorchin?
No, I have. It just cracks me up every time. So why would you do this?
Look, it is a
Don't
light.
do this. If you do this, I will yeet your M12 gunfighter carriage if I see it at a
Look,
tournament.
theme-wise and aesthetics that you want, do whatever you want.
Nah.
You know what? If I'm a TO, I will specifically stipulate that the HMG version of this is banned, and I'm not going to explain it.
Forget
I'm just
everything
gonna
else that's
leave-
been discussed in the last 6 months. It's like, this vehicle, that's it.
And then it'll be followed by, don't ask me if you can take rifle grenades.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another HMG podcast episode. So we've got some interesting discussion that we're going to get into today with an army review. So similar to our German army review that we did, we're now going to be doing the Armies of USA or United States. Yeah, Gorshin's pretty pleased about this one. He's played US.
I was trying to point that at you, Dan, to show off the book.
Oh, of course.
Oh,
Yeah. I thought you were trying to dab or something, and I was like, I don't understand. Yeah, so we're looking to get a kick into that and actually talk through the US forces, the US troops, all their different tanks, the selector options they've got. They've obviously benefited from some of the latest campaign books that have come through, both for soft belly, soft underbelly, sorry, and obviously the D-Day campaign books that came through. There's quite a lot of interesting, cool stuff in there, but might just pass it over because I do have with me Gorchin and Jacob.
G'day, it's Jacob here. Come on, Gorchin, say hello.
Sorry, my brain short-circuited there.
Yeah, like who is speaking first?
Yeah, right. Dan
We are
stuffing
so
over the handle there.
professional. We are
Yeah.
so professional.
I'm gonna cut that. You know there's gonna be a really nice unsubtle. No, it's going to be like rough as guts.
That's effort. We don't need that. We got content. Doesn't matter.
Yeah. Speaking of things that are actually high effort, unlike this podcast, some bolt action events that have happened recently. I know Attack on Cameron Ridge just happened.
Yeah, so Attack on Cameron Ridge. So for those who aren't aware, the attack on Cameron Ridge was part of Operation Compass as the attack on Karen moved through, and so that was largely the British forces pushing against the Italians, and then later a couple of German units and forces as they went on to secure the ports and to. Sorry, I've just got a message. Hopefully that hasn't come through on the chat there. I know, comedy of errors, right? This is hilarious.
So what happens when we don't have Tyler? The whole thing just falls apart.
He's like, "You'll be fine," and we're going, "Yeah, no." And yeah, so the attack on Cameron Ridge itself, there was a ridge line that was needed to be taken that would oversee the approach into Karen and the town, and essentially that you had to take that strategically to get any sort of positioning to support an advance.
What theater was this?
This was in North Africa.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was Desert War. It happened in 1941, I think it was. 1941. And so it was still relatively early war equipment, vehicles, push back against Rommel and all the things that were going on around that time. We originally had 3 missions that we were going to set up. There was a little bit of confusion on the day because I had misunderstood what time we were starting or were allowed to start in the store, and obviously in between we were setting everything up and putting the players pack, we had changes to our COVID restrictions. We actually had changes to the store opening times that was from when I started to when we actually ran it. And so yeah, that was a little bit confusing, but we still got there in the end. And we ended up having only 4 players could make it down on the day, but I charged ahead because this was more a narrative-driven event rather than a full-on tournament event. And those 4 players had an absolute blast. So we played through. The first mission was double envelopment, which again some people are a little bit pros and cons against that particular mission style, but it made sense for the theme of the event. And then we played King of the Hill, or a modified version of King of the Hill. And that was get as many models as you can, so individual infantry models as you can, on top of the hill, and each table had a hill. And if you couldn't get, or if you're going to have the same amount of models, or no one was going to end up with models on the hill, because everyone was throwing HE templates around, and so infantry didn't really last that long. You then had the flanks of the hill with the secondary objectives. So and so you had people that we all pushed for the center with virtually everything we had. Had a bit of fisticuffs. Everyone realized that many things were just not going to end out that well. It had the potential for some of our games to draw. In like on the game that I was playing, I was versing Brad Warnock, and the his artillery had delayed for 2 turns and was basically focused and centered on that hill in the center. And he had more units around it than what I did. So I was like, this is going to be great. This is going to be fantastic. He's going to pin all his own stuff. And then I'm just going to be able to come in with my like extra units and whatever. And basically, yes, he took some pins, but essentially like nothing else happened. And when I started looking at the board of how many models I could get to suddenly fight and contest the objective, I was like, they can't make it. They're actually too far away. And so I was like, even if I wanted to get them there, like they physically couldn't make the distance. And so, I sort of looked at the table at the end of turn. We met, I think, to turn 5, and I looked at the table and I said to Brad, I'm like, so I can't win and I can't draw. So you're going to win this one, which was, it was hard fought, and similar with the first round with double envelopment. Both
Getting
tables
sloppy, Dan.
Well, to be fair, when's the last time that I played a game? I will be playing at Skulls in April, which is probably a good transition into the next event.
Yeah.
I'll make a commitment for that too.
Yeah.
And not only...
Go ahead, Dan.
Not only will I be playing at Skulls in April, I will have a fully painted Winter Bulgarian force.
Yes.
Finally!
So those that don't know, you got to check way back in our episode.
First episode.
This is
Start with episode 1.
And you would
and in
also
episode 1 they were already aged.
And you will see some of them in our Christmas special from well, not last Christmas, we just had the one before that.
Yeah.
No, you won't. They were Nick's models, remember?
Really?
Yeah, none of them were mine.
Even the Stoog?
Yeah.
Oh, damn.
But I've essentially finished up my diploma now. Got the last bits and pieces ready to go to be done. Yeah, thank you. It's
long journey.
It's been achievable, but it's also I couldn't condense the time limit over the 18 months. Like it was just set on that time. So it's been a long time to get through all the content and then get the certificate on the other end of it.
Gotta love bureaucracy, Dan.
Oh, project manager, mate. It's bread and butter for me at the moment. But what it does mean, of course, is that I've got a little bit more free time. So the last couple of free days and times that I've had over the weekends and whatever, I'm trying to be preparing to get ready for April to finish off the army, because my New Year's resolution is that this is the year of completion. And so all my sort of half-finished projects are going to get done. I don't know how many new projects I will start in that process.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's not true. I know of some of the new projects that I've started.
It's funny you say that, because I went the exact opposite way this year. It's like, because I'm always like motivating myself. Motivating myself with like artificial deadlines. Like I will force, for example, for November Skulls, I said I'm going to take my Australians. So, I built and painted an entire army in a couple of weeks. Right? It was 50 or 60 models, including the artillery piece and the tank and stuff. Okay, admittedly they weren't based, so there is that. But yeah, I just worked through that whole thing, and that's kind of my normal MO. But this year I went, no, you know what? I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to work on whatever I feel like working on for however long I feel on working on it until I think it's done. So there's been a lot of projects where, I'd put in 110%, and then there's that last little bit, which usually ends up being the base, and I will just kind of phone that in. And I'm just not going to do that. I'm just going to work
Goblin
on something.
green, just sort of.
I'm just not going to do that. So there's a couple of competitions this year that I would like to enter stuff for, and that's usually the other deadlines. It's either tournaments or painting competitions. And this year I said, nah, I'm just going to work on a project until I'm happy with it. But what I am going to bring for Skulls, to bring us back onto the railroad, what I'm going to try to bring for Skulls is a Battle of the Bulge list. So nothing super crazy in terms of theater selectors and stuff. I have had a look through the Battle of the Bulge book. All I ask is for a TO who will let me bring rifle grenades. Not because I'm going to bring 20 of them, but just because the US infantry squads had them. It was a big part of the doctrine, and for the love of God, let me use a fucking rifle grenade.
Speaking of, how many points does a rifle grenade cost per model?
They're 20 points. It's a 6 to 18 inch, 1 inch HE indirect fire. Complete garbage. It is absolute garbage. The only time they become efficient is when you spam them. But and then because they kind of work.
Then
efficient's not the right word. Usable is when you spam them.
It's still an expensive endeavor.
Yeah. What I would love is if there was some way you could like direct fire them. So rather than hitting on a 6, you could you automatically had a neg 1 to hit plus long range modifiers and all the other stuff. So then if you caught an infantry squad out in the open, you could still nail them with a rifle grenade. Something like that would be cool. But I also get why, because 1 inch templates can get scary if you can fit 3 of them into a squad with direct fire.
I mean, it can be scary enough with the Japanese grenadier squads that have 3 light mortars. Now, fair enough, their range is a little bit further as well.
24,
but,
right?
Yeah, up to 24. But even so, it's like 3 of those templates dropping down is particularly nasty.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna.
you got to hit, but
I'm just gonna get 1 in each squad because I'm only gonna have 3 squads. And then the other thing that's kind of thematic is I'm gonna take the 3 veteran airborne MMG engineer teams, which are 75 points. Which are 75 points. They start dug in ambush, hidden. Dug in, ambush, hidden, and hard cover. The
last time we had this conversation, you said that you might take 1.
Well, I realized
the option is 3.
I realized there were 3 for 1, and there's an MMG team in every US paratrooper squad. It's the Browning Vertical. So I'm like, I can't not. I mean, if I'm gonna take squads to fill out the TO&E, I can't not. The challenge was because 1 platoon is only 2 squads at this point. They still didn't go to the 3 squad format. It kind of happened just after Battle of the Bulge. On paper it happened during, but reinforcing paratroopers in Battle of the Bulge was kind of the problem, right? You couldn't really do it. And so ostensibly they went to 3. So I was like, maybe I could go to 4. But then I'd need another officer, and then I'd have to get a captain, and then I can't fit all the other stuff in, and I need my toys.
Oh yeah.
So I'll see.
Look,
I'll see.
I can't begrudge you toys. Considering that I play Bulgaria, I am jealous of everyone's toys.
Although I looked at my list and I was just like, what's my anti-tank threat? Hopes and dreams. I'm like, this feels like Battle of the Bulge, all right?
Oh, nuts, man.
I mean, I think I can squeeze. I can take 2 bazooka teams in that list, so maybe that'll be it. But I don't know. 1,000 points, 12 order dice. It becomes a bit tricky. So
2 sounds good to me if you can fit them in.
Yeah, we'll see. Look, the thing is, I would happily sacrifice 1 bazooka team for 3 rifle grenade launchers. That is a happy trade I would take. Not in terms of efficiency, but just because that's just the TO&E. So hopefully Justin will let that one fly as a TO. And if he doesn't, well then we'll just have to get another TO, because I will just point out that all of the TOs in Perth have so far rejected my rifle grenade, and none of them are TOs again. I mean, there's just a really strong correlation there that has absolutely no causality.
There is one thing to point out there, which is Gorchin has actually not asked me specifically about rifle grenades, as far as I'm aware. Well, I mean, The challenge is they're an optional rule, right?
So yeah, see. So
Yeah.
Dan was like, "No, don't worry, I'm the cool TO, but I would have never allowed it anyway." So
Your words, your words.
But yes,
But
why allow one optional rule and not the rest?
yeah,
yeah,
because I know
it
what
Yeah.
Dan's
becomes
going to be like. Oh, but they're only legal if you ask your opponent, and then what else are going to have to put in? All of the other optional rules that allow me to ask my opponent. It just becomes a
well,
like slippery
Mate,
slope.
if we're on the table, take the rifle grenades. Just do it.
I'll bring 2 lists.
we'll just yeah, I was gonna say we'll just give you like 1,060-point list against Jacob.
No,
Don't care. Just do it.
I'll bring 2,000-point lists, and I'll be like, one for the person who allows rifle grenades, one who doesn't. And I know how that conversation is going to go. It's like, do you want 2 bazooka teams on the table, or do you want 1 bazooka team and
Mate.
3 rifle grenade launchers?
The funny thing is, right, you wouldn't even need to go that far. You'd just be like, hey, I want to take rifle grenades, and technically that's this list. Are you okay with it? And virtually every opponent in Perth is going to go, rifle grenade? Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Sounds cool.
But yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
So speaking of skulls, do you have you sorted out your list, Dan? Do you know what you're going to take?
My list? Yeah. So as I said, I was taking Bulgaria, so that means that so for skulls, you're allowed to take a theater selector across any period of time from 1939 through to 45, essentially anything that you would like, any campaign book, theater selector, units that are still bound to the certain theater selectors are still stuck, but that's fine because Bulgaria only has one theater selector. Yep.
And
From
what's unique
1941
about
to
that?
44, virtually nothing. So it's one of the things I really enjoy about playing the Bulgarians is that I don't get any tools really. Sorry, that's not quite true. I get some tools, but I get very predictable tools. I can't drop a flamer in a half track or a truck because I don't get half tracks and I don't get flamethrowers. So I've got a truck that I can run up the field. Historically, Bulgaria was they were a belligerent power, but they were a supplementary force. They never really had a big military that was forced out onto any aggressive action with the latest tech or anything like that. So whilst they were supplemented with German stuff, it was basically all the surplus stuff and the stuff that was captured in France that possibly didn't work anymore. And so for skulls, I looked at a few different things. One of them was taking a tank platoon because I still get access to the general sort of selector types. One of them was taking a tank platoon and actually building it around an internal security force. So using all like armored cars and scout recon elements backed up with stacks of infantry, not all the different tanks that I could take. Part of me wanted to go the other way and do my occupation force, which is their theatre selector title, and put 2 Panzer IVs in that. One of them being a German one, so it gets all the German rules and Tiger Fear and all that goodness. Couldn't bring myself to do that. The whole reason that I'm playing Bulgaria predominantly for this event is because it's a challenge to play with no special tools. Like, and the special rules, they have the Axis support, which is generic for the rest of the minor nations, and they have the counter partisan rule, and that basically means that snipers, observers, and spotters can't forward deploy, which, whilst that's powerful, after turn 1 essentially is useless.
Yep. And
So,
don't they have the anti what is it? The outflank ability.
Yeah. So that's bound up in the same rules. So that is quite powerful for the missions. If you're playing a set of rule sets where your opponent's allowed to potentially outflank things from reserve, Bulgaria simply says no, you can't do that. And so I never have to worry about the rear or the flanks of my army. I only ever have to worry about what's in front of me. So that's quite useful. It'd be more useful if I had certain other tools to really leverage that. Interestingly enough, I can actually put stuff in outflank. So I can deny you the outflank, but put stuff in. But I find generally there's little benefit in most cases. Because I don't have a pioneer squad that I can just put in the truck and have it come on with the flamethrower. Basically, everyone is rifles and a single light machine gun. maybe Panzerfaust, maybe.
Yep.
But that's okay. But we're not here to talk about Bulgaria. We are here to talk
No.
about Armies of the USA.
The USA.
Mm.
So, why would we want to play USA? Take it from the top, Gorchin. Let me know. Why did you pick USA? Why is it the best nation out there? Why is it your favorite?
Why did I pick USA is the first question.
Yeah.
I think I've covered this piecemeal before, but the main thing is like, I love playing war games. I think they're a lot of fun, but also a big part of the war game appeal to me is history and getting stuck into the military history research that's behind it. So one of the reasons I picked the US is because all of their field manuals, all of their doctrines are all public access. Not just the stuff from World War II, by the way. You can find even I think a lot of the modern operational stuff
That's pretty cool.
is public access. So the thing about like doctrinal manuals is that they're typically written so generically that they can be applied everywhere, but as a result, they don't actually teach you anything. But nevertheless, if you are a person who appreciates principles and that sort of thing, reading them you'll actually gain a big understanding of. So that was a big driver for me, was that I knew that if I wanted to access the history, it was publicly available, and it was in a language I could read. So my German's not good enough to read basically what is a technical document, especially a technical document that is 70 or 80 years old, because the language has changed a lot. I think a lot of people don't realize that, particularly with English, because it evolves over time. And a lot of the World War II stuff that we see, TVs and movie shows, and even HBO's Band of Brothers, with the exception of maybe the one joke in like the second episode about the guy's name being Malaki, being the only like comment about how much the language has changed. A lot of those sorts of things represent massive barriers. So I went, stuff it, I'll just pick something I can actually read and interpret, and I can go from there. So obviously, like, I do like competing and that sort of thing, so that didn't really factor into that decision so much, because I started with the US. I have no idea what the meta is for bolt action if you start playing. Even if you ask a lot of people, you kind of get a silhouette of the meta rather than actually an understanding of why it's the meta and why those things work. So if you want like an allied meta pick, just go Soviets. A lot of people say that the US is training wheels, and we're going to get into that why when we talk about the national rules. But Soviets 100% are way more meta allied lists. That's not to say that you can't win competitively with the US, but you just have so much nastier stuff, so many more tools, so many more of the typical things like cheese wagons and cheese units and Death Star units are much more readily available in the Soviets and the US, in the Armies of the USA. But so I forget what the other two questions are. Why it's the best one ever was one of them. Why it's the best one ever? It's because they won the war. So like,
yeah,
that's a pretty good one. I mean, the Soviets helped, but they were on the other front. They helped the other front. That is criminally underappreciated in modern like pop culture, is the Eastern Front. At least here it is in the West. I hope that they spend more time teaching it in that part of the world where it was, I guess, a reality at some point in history. But yeah, the national rules and why it gets called a like bolt action with training wheels is,
here we go.
so the first one that a lot of people complain about is fire maneuver. So fire maneuver allows you to ignore the moving penalty in an advance for rifles and Browning automatic rifles. That's it. So those are kind of the main weapons. So if you put an LMG in an infantry squad that's armed with rifles and the squad moves, the rifles ignore the neg1 to hit movement penalty, but the LMG doesn't. So the only two weapons that you get it on is the rifle and carbine, because bolt action folds the M1 carbine into a standard rifle, which is criminal in and of itself, but let's not go there. And Browning automatic rifles. So Browning automatic rifles are one of the unique weapons. It's not a national rule per se, but I think only them and Free French Forces can get BARs. And it's a 5.2 shot, 30-inch rifle. It's not an assault weapon, so you don't get Tough Fighter with it, but it's a 2-shot rifle at 30 inches, and you get to ignore moving and shooting, which is probably a pretty close representation of the BAR.
And great with the national rule, really puts it right there with the ARs for the Germans.
Yeah, it means that if you wanted to match, say, for example, a German squad with or a German MMG, if you wanted to outgun a German squad with an LMG, it costs you 15 points. Because then you get 6 BAR shots and you get the added mobility. So that's where people are like, it's training wheels, because you get to ignore one of the fundamental rules of bolt action. The other training rule is modern communications. So you ignore the neg-1 penalty for coming off of reserve, and that includes outflank. Hilariously, this if you actually look at the comparison between the average like German radio and the average American radio, like you really can appreciate it. I think a standard Panzer III platoon. So this is an armored vehicle with an engine and an electricity generator. The standard range of the radio that was only in one of the vehicles, it wasn't in all of the vehicles, was 4 kilometers.
Right.
The average like US radio was like 200 kilometers, and it was just some dude with a backpack.
How does that even happen?
Yeah, and so admittedly the Germans ended up putting a radio in every Panzer III, and obviously the later vehicles got them as well, but they weren't 200-kilometer radios, not by any stretch of the imagination. So I just think it's hilarious that like several orders of magnitude difference gets just like you just lose the neg-1 for reserves. It also counts for outflank, which is why I like outflanking so much.
That's a really cool rule.
I kind of see the radios taking a part in their air superiority rule as well. It's like the reason they're able to get dual airstrikes isn't just because of the number of planes, but the fact that they can actually get the contact to actually call in a secondary strike.
Yeah. So that's the third national rule. Your air observer gets 2 air attacks, not just 1 per observer.
Yeah.
So it doesn't cost any more. You just get a second airplane. People say it doubles your chance of rookie pilot, which is probably about as correct as Christopher Columbus saying he arrived in the West Indies, which is hilarious because when you think about it, he sailed west to prove that you get to the East Indies. He got to a place that he thought was the East Indies, and he called it West India. Like, so air superiority, yeah. So you also obviously double your chances of all of the other stuff happening as well, which is a 66% chance. I did the math.
I was going to say, and it's still higher, right? And the whole conversation about observers and their value and their impact on the game is a different conversation altogether. And there are very different viewpoints on that. I have found when I've taken the air observers for Americans, I generally will take 1 because it's part of the rules, and so for the national run, so
it's how you balance at 1,000 points, right?
Yeah, and when I took my Americans, not 2 skulls ago, I think it was 3 skulls ago, three skull events back. I had my Americans there, had the air observer. Basically, the whole thing was a veteran list, and I was like, even if I do manage to hit my own guys, I'm at least trying to mitigate some of those pins. But I think he rookie piloted once in the first mission, and other than that, he was pretty much bang on point for everything. But you have games like that where it's like, this is doing what it's meant to do, and I feel good about it. And then you have some of the other games.
I might be jumping on ahead with this idea, but we're talking about air observers. How do you play them in the sense, if you take them, for many of the other nations, it seems to be something that I'd only go for a regular. But because you have those 2 airstrikes, is veteran a popular choice? Is that something that you consider each time you're making a list?
Usually I will go... Usually I've gone veteran, but in hindsight, just go regular. Because all you need is line of sight. There's no range, so you just park him right in the back corner of the board, away from the enemy sniper, and then away you go. You don't even need the +1 bodyguard. You just don't, because if you're getting shot at, you just go down. And yeah, it's
small team already. Yeah.
And it's usually if you're in the back corner and they're shooting at you,
Range.
Yeah, range, small team, and also like they didn't have
They're
another target.
Yeah,
They really did, like, by all means, delay the airstrike.
I was going to say, everyone's so airstrikes just aren't that good. They aren't that good. It's like, but as soon as you put one on the board, they're like, oh, I've got to kill that. I forgot to kill that.
people don't realize like just exactly how lethal an airstrike is when it comes in. The worst thing you can roll is 2d6 pen 2 hits. That's the worst. Ignoring all of the pins and all the other stuff that happens,
which is fantastic.
Yeah. The thing is, like, I think the other part is because of the machine gun meta being what it is. If you see a lot of pintle machine guns in your scene, they are basically 75 wasted points, or you have to actually place them really cleverly, because you place your aircraft marker 18 inches away from your target, not up to, bang on 18, which means that if you choose the right target, you can actually outrange most of the machine guns. But at this point, you're like, you have to get the air observer, you have to hide him from the sniper, you have to target a unit that's away from machine guns, you have to not roll the 1, you have to do all this other stuff. It becomes like a pretty niche thing. That all being said, competitively, I tend to not take one. I kind of don't take observers competitively. I think they're just like, not that they don't work, but I just it doesn't suit my playstyle. I would rather spend 100 points on dudes who can punch my opponent's dudes in the face.
Yep.
It's just me. But that, every time I've taken them narratively, it has been the best game, including when I've like rookie piloted myself twice. Like, it's just too much fun to not enjoy. And
that was an interesting game.
And hilariously, what I find is that often when I get rookie piloted by myself, most people just choose to take out the actual observer before he does a second strike. And so it's kind of a self-correcting problem anyway. I'm just like, okay.
I would never do that.
I'm just like,
there's a chance this could happen again.
No. I'm Bulgaria. I go, oh, I've got potentially no, that kills a tank.
Yeah. It's fantastic. So yeah, the last national rule is basically fire and maneuver for vehicles, but it's got an even smaller like use case. If the vehicle is veteran and has the gyro stabilize special rule, you ignore the neg 1 to hit on cannon on the main gun, not on anything else, including the coaxial machine gun, which is a weird set of decisions, because the veteran part makes some sense. So the gyro stabilizer was actually this big kind of secret for the US, because not a lot of other nations had them.
Many.
Yeah, it was this not well known is not the quite thing. It was an in plain sight top secret piece of equipment. So not every tank crew was actually taught how to use the gyro stabilizer, and there was no training pamphlet. So usually rifle grenades, composition B for anti-tank grenades, all of this other stuff, there was a training pamphlet that went with it, that was distributed in theater of operations, not for the gyro stabilizer, because they didn't want, if you knew how to use one, you knew how one worked, and that meant they could be reverse engineered. And so this was kind of like this big top secret thing. There was a couple of armor divisions that were trained on them, exclusively on them, but they didn't have the training pamphlet. They didn't use them all the time. And between the training and then having to use them, they kind of forgot how they worked. So you had this weird instance where a lot of crews, like, because it's in your vehicle, and even if you haven't been trained on it, you're going to be like, what the hell is this thing? You're going to flick it on, because it's a hydraulic, I don't know if that's the right word, if it's oil based, but it's a hydraulic system that basically counteracts the movement of your tank and keeps your gun stable. It's not as good as modern stabilizers, of course, but if you have no idea what it does and you turn it on and you suddenly start driving and you're a gunner and you're trying to counteract the movement of the tank on the drive, and the gun's are already doing that, you're going to get this really weird thing where your turret's going all over the place and the gun seems to be doing the opposite of what you're telling it to. you're going to be like, what the fuck? I'm going to turn that off.
Yeah, exactly.
And so
This
you
is
only,
useless.
yeah, exactly. It's mucking with my aiming. I'm going to turn it off. So you had a lot of crews do that as well, and some crews just uninstalled it. They were just like, oh,
Yep.
whatever. So there was actually, in terms of percentages,
For other stuff.
in terms of percentages for tanks, tanks that actually had them and used them is actually quite a small percentage. But
So
the entire gun mantlet was gyro stabilized, including the coaxial machine gun. So
Yeah, that's the part I find is like, it's like coaxial. It says no, coaxial doesn't count. It's just for the main gun. I'm like, okay, I get that almost from a balance point of view, but that's completely completely inaccurate.
So that one's a balance decision, which I get, because I mean, cheese wagons are bad enough as it is, and with the Sherman you can't get 3 machine guns on it with the Pintle, so it can be pretty oppressive. Medium tank with 3 machine guns. But it was in the eventually the training pamphlets were controlled documents stateside. They were just never issued. They were never sent with the vehicles overseas. And so when they actually looked at them later, there are specific instructions about how to use the machine gun when it's gyro stabilized. Because the thing about the machine gun is not a laser. It's intended to. It's an area weapon, right? You're like a flamethrower template or something, right? You spray an area. Recon by fire. And so they were actually taught to shoot in a Z pattern with the coaxial to replicate the beaten zone. And a lot of people, hilariously, as a segue, a lot of people say the problem with the Bren gun was that it was too accurate, which is the most absurd criticism of a machine gun, because if it's too accurate, you can make it less accurate by shooting less accurately. you can spray it, or as I've seen on reenactors and guys who've used Bren guns on the range, you don't hold it as tightly and it'll bounce a little bit and you'll get the beaten zone. So it's like, it's armchair historians are the worst kind of people, says the armchair historian. So those are the 4 main national rules for the US, and that's why people say that it's kind of like bolt action with training wheels, because you ignore the reserves, you ignore the fire maneuver with most of your units, and you can ignore fire maneuver on your veteran medium tank, which is as we've talked about a lot, like medium tanks are thematically fun, not super competitive. And so when people start in bolt action, the first things that typically bite them is the movement penalty, the reserve penalty, and their medium tanks. And so, if you're just coming into bolt action and you see a nation and you play a few games, you go, all of this is really frustrating, and you come up against the US player and he goes, no, I ignore that. Like, I can see where the training wheel perception comes from, but considering all of the other stuff you don't get as a US player, it's kind of nice to have something to play with.
What do you mean? What do you mean stuff you don't get?
You cannot fully equip any unit with an SMG or BARs or anything like this. You also don't get fanatics. You also don't get absurd, like, close combat capable troops. So either toughest boots or Gurkhas or whatever. No fun allowed. And people don't let you take rifle grenades. They don't let you take rifle grenades.
Oh, man.
He's going to be a broken record on that one.
Oh, should we move into the units then?
Yeah, look, I think so. I think Gorchin's covered those rules pretty well. One of the ones that I hadn't realized for the longest time that they actually had was that modern communications one, and their radios and the reserve, to the point where I was playing Americans and not using that rule. Because I was like, that rule's kind of not that important or impactful to me. And then as I read it, I went, actually,
that's really nice.
That's shortchanged myself on quite a few things over the years, I think. But
as I said, the 2 things you can do with that one is outflank, obviously. The other one that I really like is if you are bringing a tank in at least a competitive environment, you just leave it in reserve, let them bring their tank on, and then you can choose to either play the game of cat and mouse or do what I do and just go, that's a cute tank you've got on the other side of the table, I'm going to put mine here.
Mm-hmm. With a veteran stabilized tank, even.
You can. You can. I don't, but yeah, you can. You can.
I
the
do for what it's worth. I generally will take a gyro.
we can get to it when we get to tank selection.
Yep. Definitely an expensive investment.
Yeah. So,
But
officer wise, or headquarters units.
Let's start there.
Well, I mean, this is probably where, some of the other forces you've got specific types of officers or HQ units or things that have come forward. But generally, and possibly from the training wheels aspect, you get the bare bones starter point setups for most of the US stuff.
Yeah, forward observers. You don't even get a naval observer. Officers are all standard and standard cost.
Before we go too far, artillery observer, is this something a US player considers?
If they're a trader, yeah. No, look, honestly, I think artillery observers genuinely have their place.
Definitely.
Yeah, I've used artillery observers significantly more than air observers. Americans is generally the one where I would flip it and take air instead of artillery. The one time that I definitely would be considering artillery is if I'm running some sort of selector or list that allows me to take 2, and so I could get the best of both worlds.
Yeah. And I actually think in those selectors it specifically says you can't take a duplicate.
That too.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Just because 4 airstrikes is impressive.
Well, I mean, in version 1, actually, and you can technically still do it in version 2, but in version 1, when they were running multiple platoons as sort of a standard of what you could run in events, one of the classic American lists was 2 platoons, each with a Air Force observer. So it was over the course of the game 4 separate airstrikes, 2 of which could be in play at times. Because they were from different units, and that I've faced that off against one of my Soviet lists very, very early on when I started bolt action, and that's not particularly pleasant.
It's disgusting. It is absolutely disgusting. I've seen what.
Considering what I've seen since, I don't know if I'd agree.
If it pops, it's disgusting. I think it's one of those things where there's a double edge to the sword, whereas a lot of the other like meta strategies don't have a second edge. There was one game against Quinn where I brought an air observer as US and he brought one as Fallschirmjäger, and he got rookie pilot. And so he got hit by 3 airstrikes in one game, and it was
poor guy.
Like, just don't even bother like bringing your forces next time when that happens.
Or just bring basic riflemen, because then you don't feel as bad when.
Because he was playing this really cool thematic list with like mixed veterancy. So like some of his guys were green and some of the veteran representing sort of the Normandy, like Fallschirmjäger milieu regiments that got created, and it was just like the inexperienced guys were just getting hosed by infantry squads, and then the veterans were just kept getting bombarded by airplanes. Terrible. You can bring an artillery
thematic
observer.
for D-Day.
Thematic for sure. You can bring artillery observers as US. There's obviously nothing saying you can't. I know a lot of people really like them competitively. They certainly do fit a particular play style. So, I would just say if you're not taking the air observer and you're not using like BAR, so you're not kind of playing fire and maneuver, you're going to get more bang for your buck out of another nation.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment. And the same could be said for any of the nations that we review. Is like essentially, if you're not going to leverage the national rules to some degree, in some way, shape, or form, then possibly you could do what you're doing with a different colored uniform and it'll be better. I think it is absolutely a trap to go, I'm playing Americans, I want to take an observer, so it has to be an Air Force observer. That's definitely a trap. But if you're not using any of the national special rules and any of the cool units, it's like, find another nation that suits your playstyle.
Is this the right choice for you?
Absolutely.
All right, let's move into infantry.
So the other HQ choices is just medic, and they get the chaplain later, but they're all standard, nothing interesting there.
Infantry squads. Now this is this is something where it does make it a little bit different. So with the time frame that America enters the war with, and when the book itself first came out before the FAQ and the errata, you essentially didn't really get veteran squads.
Yeah, yeah. You had to take either a paratrooper or something, or you couldn't get regular GI Joes as we know them in veteran. It was regular inexperienced.
Yep.
But credit where credit's due. They went to 12 men with 1 BAR. That is TONE. Plus a rifle grenade.
But anyway, with the errata and the FAQ obviously brought that in, which meant that basically just put the US on the same playing field as all the other nations with some form of veteran squad.
With added tough fighter.
With added tough fighter, so that was quite nice. And that, again, this book's been out for a while. That's not news to anyone that's been in the game for a while. But for those that are just starting up, you do have more options technically than what is in here. Get the FAQ.
There's a couple of nice surprises in there. I will note that all of the regular infantry squads can get anti-tank grenades, though, which is not super popular, but it is an option.
A lot of these squads, just glancing through them, it seems that America tends to have a maximum squad size of 12. What sort of choices do you make in relation to your ideal size of a squad before you add on extra weapons, veterancy, special rules, etc.?
So there's kind of, as I said, there's two different ways of playing here. If you're playing competitively, it's very, very, very difficult to go past the Marine Corps squad. It just because once we go through the other squads, you'll see why. But if I think one of the things that's really great about the Armies of USA is that it really captures all of the different types of infantry very well. A lot of other nations just go, it's infantry, like, whatever. The Germans being one of the other notable exceptions, same as the Soviets. I find that the different British infantry choices, unless you go specifically into the national ones, and you double down with some of the national characteristics, they're really quite sort of copy-paste. But
they kind of are, because that's sort of how the British Army operated for a lot of it, right? It's like, no, you're a rifleman. Here's your Lee Enfield.
Whereas the Americans made a distinction between glider infantry, parachute infantry, and leg infantry, and that actually comes through. So the regular infantry went through squad size up to 12. As you get into late war, you can have 2 BARs. I don't think you can get 3 in the regular infantry squad, even with the veteran one. By TONE, they only ever had 2, but they got stolen and shared and divided so much. You could never get enough BARs, was basically how it went. Particularly because on paper, if you had a 12-man squad with 2 BARs, you had a lot of firepower with your M1s being semi-automatic as well. And ammo wasn't that much of a problem for the US, but you never had 12. You'd get into one firefight and you'd be down to 7 or 8 if you even started with 12. And at that point, you need at least a second BAR just to keep up with firepower.
As with most things, it's all a shooting match, right?
Fire superiority. Engineer squad. The cool thing about this one is it can be regular. A lot of nations don't get regular engineers with flamers. Usually have to invest in veterans to get flamers. One flamer, 2 BARs, and up to 2 SMGs, including the NCO. You can give them all anti-tank grenades if you like.
Do you like to build in any redundancy into your engineer squads in the sense of weapon systems outside the flamer?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I will stack. I will stack that engineer squad with everything, because by the time you've spent, even if you went with regular and the flamethrower, I think the smallest squad size is still 5. So if you spent 70 points, you might as well load up every other guy with a gun and then you
Yep.
kind of pad that out to about 8 typically. I don't think you can actually. No, you can't go more than 8, which is great because there's a perfect transport in the US list, in the US Army's book, which we'll get to later. There is a beautiful sweet spot transport. Yeah,
It's interesting. So for when I run my engineers in the veteran list, I actually run the engineers as a 5-man veteran squad.
right.
I,
Okay,
I don't give them
just a
extra
jack in the
men,
box. Yeah,
just a jack in the box, and they're basically just packed with a flamethrower, and they come out of a veteran half track. And most people go, veteran half track, that's so expensive. Yeah, but it's also leadership value, morale value 10,
yeah,
which makes it actually makes it very hard to stop from
Yep.
prep bombardments or pins or
Yep.
whatever. Obviously, it's still armor 7, right? So any shot that it's going to go through it is going to go through it. But the keeping it moving and being able to leverage all of the benefits
Yeah.
was very important in that list. Very important.
and that's why you shouldn't take a half track, but an M20 scout car instead.
Eh,
This is the thing. This is a hill that I will die on. Is that people get transports that are way too fucking big. The transport only needs to be as big enough to fit the things that go in it, and all other space, all additional space is a waste. It's just an absolute waste.
Occasionally, I wouldn't just put them in there; they'd have a couple of other things in as well. So, but arguably, I could probably still have used the M20.
Yeah, and if you're sticking more than one unit in a transport, I will shoot it with my entire army. I'm bored. I've got nothing else to do.
Only if you can see it.
So the paratrooper squad is the main difference here is that they have to be veteran just to kind of represent the training. You can have LMGs but not BARs, which is it's actually fair because they didn't get BARs until Market Garden.
Okay.
And later. So
I think in the added units, you've got the late war paratrooper as well.
Yeah. So the late war, you can add, I think it's 2 LMGs and or 1 BAR, which is nice. The glider squad is basically just a regular or veteran version of the regular infantry squad. So 3 SMGs up to 2 BARs, and they can be veteran as well, that was kind of your access to veteran infantry until the FAQ. But the main thing to note here is the paratrooper squad doesn't even have stubborn, which I think they added in the FAQ. They must have added the stubborn in the FAQ because they have stubborn now. And that's kind of in bolt action, if it is a paratrooper unit, it has stubborn. That's just the way they...
Generally how that goes, yeah. I can't remember if the Soviet ones do, but...
Yeah, but they're not real paratroopers.
Ooh.
Paratroopers jump out of planes. They don't walk. So glider infantry is just your veteran option. Now we get to see some cool, unique
we do.
US units. So this is the Ranger Squad. Horrifyingly oppressive if played either in spam or by people like me, which is aggressive and in spam. I don't... One is none, two is none, 3 is 1, and 4 is enough. As far as I'm concerned. So the one...
5.
Yeah. One thing I will note about the paratrooper squad is the reason they were given LMGs was because the paratrooper squads were supposed to be deployed behind enemy lines, and you don't have access to your entire weight of an infantry division and firepower, so they just loaded up the paratrooper platoons at a platoon level with firepower, including bazookas and LMGs everywhere and stuff. So that was their shtick. Was you're going to be out there by yourself, but have a whole bunch of guns. The Ranger Squad has to be taken veteran. It can go up to 11 men, I think. It's a very weird number. I think there's something about the Ranger TONE. I think they had actually 2 fire teams led by sergeants plus a staff sergeant, which was not how the other squads were run. The other squads were run into A, B, and C fire teams with scouts and gun teams and stuff. But I'm not super certain on that one. 1 LMG, 1 BAR, 3 LMG, 3 SMGs. The LMG and the Ranger Squad seems a little bit like incongruent, but I think it actually works better in a Ranger squad than it does in some of the other squads. The reason is because the Ranger special rule is they're allowed to make a run move after both sides have finished setup, but before the first turn of the game. And this is usually played after forward deployment as well. So you can't use the Rangers to impede on the forward deployment zone of your opponent. But the important thing is it happens before prep bombardment. And if you leave your deployment zone, they only get hit by the prep bombardment on a 4+. So you do your 4+, and then you do your standard D6 roll for prep bombardment.
That is beautiful.
Yeah, it's pretty good. But the main thing is it's a full run move. It's 12 inches land grab. And if you do it with all of your ranges and you basically then stick with support weapons, so howitzers and mortars, which don't need to move up, you've grabbed a massive chunk of the board.
Yeah.
Or you've redeployed. Yeah. Or you've completely redeployed.
I'm a big fan of using them to redeploy as well. So like you can almost in certain missions, depending on what your setup is, you can use them knowing full well. Like you can set them up in the open, and people will go, "Oh, I'm gonna absolutely destroy that squad," and you go, "No, you're not. See ya." And you just move them and just bolt them behind the building, and all of a sudden they're like,
"Oh."
There's a great game I played against a Japanese player where it was playing Manhunt, where I deployed in the circle in the middle with half of my forces, and he deployed along like one edge, and he had a sniper team out, and I ran before the game started, and I was within like 5 inches of the sniper, and then first I just charged the sniper, and then I just like parked myself up against his deployment zone. Now that squad was dead, right? Because he's going to face the entire army as the turn goes on. But he just kept moving stuff onto the board. I just left the squad there. Went down at every opportunity, and I just moved back with everything else. And so that massively slowed him down because he was focused on killing this one squad. And admittedly, if he didn't, I was just going to pick out anything that wasn't a full squad.
Yeah. And it also, if he ever wants to use Bonsai, anything that can see that squad is automatically closer. That's forced to run towards it anyway.
Yeah. See, I didn't know that part of the rule of Banzai when I played him. So he actually should have Banzai'd in a circle around his deployment zone. But I know that now. So that's a really great way to counter Japanese armies. Now, it requires a few things to go right. You have to have your rangers. He has to fall for the bait and all the other stuff. But throwing out sacrificial units, like maybe not a full ranger squad, throwing out sacrificial units to get the Banzai charges forced in that direction can really buy you a lot of time. So I really like ranger spam. It's good fun. This is why I think LMGs work really well, because you can actually deploy the LMG where you want it before the game starts without your opponent knowing that they're going to be there necessarily. And then LMGs and you can add a BAR and a whole bunch of rifles. You could probably get, 15, 16, 17 shots out of a squad. And they're all veterans, ideally in cover. You're going to cop a lot of hate for that.
I think the other big thing that goes with that is not only with your preparations, essentially, that you get to do almost a turn in advance compared to your opponent. The reality is, even when you've got those light machine guns or BARs ready to go, your basic rifles are getting closer to that 12-inch mark. It reduced the range penalty as well.
Yeah.
Then you're going, I'm not taking movement, and I'm almost not taking range. You really have to deal with it before you advance. You really have to deal with it before you get close, unless you're quite confident that you're able to shift that veteran squad.
Yeah. Bring a howitzer is my answer to that. Bring a howitzer. Now we get into
Tiger tank.
Now I get into what I think
Marines.
is probably the most competitive choice for Marines, specifically the late war, because they got updated with the FAQ for a couple of things. The thing about the Marines is, as our astute listeners and viewers would have realized by now, is that Americans can't take full squads of anything. You can't take full squads of SMGs. You can't take full squads of BARs, as lovely as that would be. You can't, at this point, you can't even double down on LMGs like you can in a lot of other nations. That, again, came in FAQ and later books, and campaign books that added general units. But the early war Marine list gets 2 BARs, which at this point in the book is unheard of. It's ludicrous. And then when you get to the late war, you can take 3, which is extremely impressive. It's 6 shots that you get to move and fire with. The reason, and they can be veterans, so the early Marines can't be veterans. You can also have 3 SMGs total, so 1 for the NCO. You can also add shotguns, which aren't great, but they give you assault.
Mm-hmm.
So
They're super thematic for the Pacific theater.
They are. And so if you wanted a full squad of tough fighters, this was how you did it. You added pistols to the BARs, you added shotguns and SMGs, and you could get up to 9 guys that were tough fighters and veteran. But super expensive because you have to buy weapons to give them tough fighter, which is always more expensive than just buying tough fighter. Then the FAQ dropped for these guys, and now you can buy stubborn at 1 point per man. So there's no point buying a paratrooper list or buying a paratrooper squad because you can get stubborn on these guys, and you can get tough fighter for 1 point per man. So now there is, from a purely competitive points purchasing perspective, just get the Marine squad. The only reasonable alternative is maybe the Rangers because of the 12-inch move, but I would caveat that probably the Marines have a wider use case. Like, you're not forced into that particular play style. It is very difficult when you're building for a tournament and you're building to win. Look at your US infantry options and not choose Marines.
Yep.
I think it's. So I actually have 3 US armies. So I have an airborne, a US airborne division. I have just a sort of static early mid-war force, and I have a Marine force. And every time when I go to look at the different flexibility options within the Marine forces and the units compared to everything else, they do have that versatility. They are, in terms of point for point weapon efficiency, they have the better weapon options, and the BARs, apologies, Gaussian, BARs really sell that because they don't need a loader, so they're not they have the ability. Yeah, so they actually, if you're looking at what the comparison to a light machine gun would have been, it's a light machine gun plus a loader, and you sort of get that point equivalent cost for points versus shots. Point equivalent, not necessarily efficiency, just equivalence. Whereas the BAR is like, you don't need a loader, but you would consider that extra man involved in part of that transaction, and you're getting 3 shots at a 5-point drop. I mean, it's pretty hard to argue against it as an inappropriate sort of purchase. And when you can take 3 of them and you go, now it's 9 shots for like 15 points.
Yeah, not even the cost of an LMG.
Yeah, and you sit there and it's like, Hitler's buzzsaw does what?
Yeah. And so it's pretty impressive. Squads of 3 BARs.
As a primarily Axis player, I always tend to fight this squad, and something that scares me just as much as 3 BARs is it's such a huge squad as well. This can be 13 men, and as a German player, you're always outnumbered, not necessarily outgunned. But I always have trouble with these squads engaging in close range, because typically they'll get to the point where they can do close combat and the numbers just completely shatter whatever I've had at it. Is 13 men something that you guys consider when you make these squads?
Nah. The reason
yes.
The reason is because if I can have 3 squads of 13, or I can have 4 squads of 8.
Okay. Yep. So you just want that extra set of 3 BARs.
Well, no, I want
the order dice.
Plus the order dice, plus
that too.
Applying pins, plus another thing to distribute pins too. So if somebody sees 3 squads of 13, that's fewer things they have to pin than 4 squads of 8.
Yep.
And yes, in the in either cases, you're both looking at almost 40 miniatures across those differentials. So yes, the 13-man squads are going to last longer. So the reason why I've generally tried to do that in my Marine forces is because I just really like the idea of playing with full-size squads in most of my list. That's just how I prefer to play. So my Marines, those squads are generally beefed up with all their fun tools. Yes, sometimes even shotguns, and and they're generally 13-man squads. Now that's huge. But I also, on the other side of the fence, my Marines generally face off, if I'm doing stuff at home or whatever, they'll normally fight my Japanese, who have 15-man squads. And all of a sudden, 13 men becomes quite important.
yeah, for sure. The other thing is, like, if you get hit by a medium or a heavy howitzer, like, losing...
You can absorb those hits.
Well, it's more so the morale check, right? So losing a squad of 8 doesn't feel so bad as losing a squad of 13 from a 3-inch template. It doesn't feel as bad.
Well, I was arguing that because you can spread those 13 out over more of an area and you have more bodies, you potentially don't have to do the morale check for the first hit.
Yeah, it's definitely a way that cuts. It's a sword that cuts both ways, for sure.
Unless you play like I do and you just bunch them up. There's a photo of Facebook of that happening.
Yeah, you and me both. So that's the infantry sections. So now moving into the teams. This is one of the other, I don't know if it's a national rule, I guess it's a platoon rule. A lot of nations have a 3-for-1. So the American 3-for-1 is the machine gun team. Yeah, it's all right. It's thematic.
2 of my armies take 3 guns almost every single time. One I took the tournament, I didn't.
I have found them to be much more effective if you... I think Brad from Cast Dice said this. If you treat a machine gun team as a 5-man rifleman squad, you get much more use out of it. And so basically what that means is you park them on a backfield objective, you plink at stuff, you go down when targeted because you're there holding an objective. And I think in that way, 50 points is pretty good, but do the sneaky thing and take them in experience at only 35 points. Because if you just need them to hold on to objective, it sucks when you do get hit because you're easy to kill, but don't. Be in cover and stay down.
Just don't be hit.
Laugh whenever your opponent says he's going to shoot at your machine gun team.
I do think, because obviously you've got the heavy machine gun team as well that sits sort of in this bracket, and I find...
And that doesn't have the same selector choice?
You can't
take 3 of them?
It can be part of the 3 that you take, but it can't. But it can't be essentially its own selection. I'm fairly sure it can be.
I was under the impression that you either take one HMG team or 1 to 3 MMG teams.
Yeah, I think that's it. So if you choose to take the heavy machine gun, you essentially forfeit the 3-for-1, which is why a lot of American platoon selectors have that 2 MG slot. So if you did want to double up, you could. But my biggest challenge with it, I guess, 4 men as a team. So that's fine. The gun they shoot is only 3 shots, and that's a core rules problem. A core rules gap that I see. It's not a unit selection gap problem in this instance. But I'm paying 70 points for 3 shots at regular.
Yeah. Yeah,
but that's a hard pill to swallow.
Is it just +1 pen?
Yeah,
just +1 pen. Yeah. And it loses that +1 pen over half range.
Only against armored vehicles.
Yeah. But
so if you're shooting soft skins.
But you technically even lose that one.
I think the I don't know if the HMG shots got +1 when V2 came out. But if it was 4-3, it's a slightly better trade. But now that it's 5-3, it's like just don't. Do it.
There's no.
It's not a fair trade.
It's not a fair trade. And when you look at like vehicles, typically around 25 points to put a heavy machine gun on to get 3 shots at minusculely a better penetration value because the +1's very, very negligible. Versus 15 points for a 5-shot MMG. I'm like, feels a bit wrong.
So
that'll get addressed.
Unfortunately, don't take the HMG.
Mhm.
There's the HMG podcast.
Paint them up. Paint them up because they're pretty to have.
Yeah,
It was-
and
it was
play
one of
him as
my-
an MMG.
It was one of the first things I bought for my US after my Band of Brothers box set. I was like, oh,
Pretty
50
sure I've got
cal,
2.
Yes.
Yeah, pretty sure I've got 2. One across each of the armies, but
So the other teams that are available is Bazooka Team. I think this is pretty ubiquitous. Actually, no.
not quite.
I think only the Germans in the US, actually, now that I think about it, get a shaped charge man-portable anti-tank weapon.
What about a Piat?
Yeah, but it's 12 inches. Like Piat's it's a glorified slingshot, man. Like it's not a
hang on.
bazooka.
I think so the Piat, the Panzerschreck, and the Bazooka are essentially the only. You do have a couple of other edge cases, which have different. You start crossing into that recoilless rifle sort of space, and there's a few different types of those. But in terms of your man-portable shaped charge launchers, they're really the big 3.
I think it's only
certainly the ones that you see.
Yeah, I think it's only Pen 5 as well.
Yeah, so the Shrek is a 6, but
Right, yeah, that's the difference.
Those squads are slightly more expensive.
Yeah.
But seeing as you don't have access to, I guess, explosive weapons in your infantry squads, is this almost an auto include?
Not really.
Yeah.
I have done the Bazooka Team in the Jeep before. But that's like, I'm a high octane, high risk player. So Bazooka Team in the Jeep is your like, because you don't ignore the movement penalty because it's not a rifle. So even if you get the Jeep up and you disembark from the Jeep, you're still hitting on a 4.
See, Gorge's argument is if they hadn't called it a bazooka but called it like some sort of rifle grenade launching tube, he'd be all over it.
Yeah, wouldn't you? Look, I don't hear automatic grenade launcher. I hear fun dispenser, right? So then, a really controversial unit next is the American Sniper Team. That is 2 points more expensive than every other nation.
Oh my god!
This was just FAQ'd, so it's now the same cost as all other nations.
That was just fixed, and then people were going, "Oh, but they've got pistols." When have you ever used a pistol from your sniper team?
I know.
Yeah,
I don't think I've ever done it with.
It's when you get charged. You just like stick them
but
up.
Why? But why? I could just pay the points to give them the submachine gun.
I always do. I love it when
because now they've gone down 2 points, so I'll just pay those 2 points I was paying anyway and get the submachine gun.
Yeah. But it's also 2 points per man for the submachine gun. So when people get close to your sniper team, it's like, haha, you can't shoot me now. You can only use your rifles. You just like pop out your Thompson. Yeah. It's good fun. The flamethrower
and people love being assaulted with Tough Fighter with their sniper teams. Yeah.
Is there a thematic reason why these particular snipers, as against others, have access to SMGs?
I think it's just the ubiquitous nature of SMGs in the US, which is hilarious because you can't take a squad filled with SMGs. But
it's like, sniper, here you go. Squad that could possibly use it in urban combat, here you go.
Nah.
Just about like everybody that wasn't a frontline trooper either got an M1 carbine or by late war they got a grease gun. So tank crews got Thompsons, one for each man. Later, they were often hilariously pilfered and pinched by paratroopers. And often the paratroopers would trade. If the tank crewmen were awake, they would trade M1 carbines for Thompsons. Because the tank crewman's like, I have 4 machine guns and a 75mm gun. If it's gotten to the Thompson, if it's gotten to the Thompson, it's not going to make the difference. And also the M1 carbine is lighter and smaller. So particularly the paratrooper version with the folding stock. The grease gun, on the other hand, it was like a soda can, right? It was just this shitty sheet metal thing that just shot 9mm rounds at this god awful rate of fire. But it fucking worked. And they could make thousands of them.
It was the production side of
Yeah,
it where it was
yeah.
like, look, it's not pretty, but we have millions of them.
Yeah. It was the very Russian machine gun.
Oh yeah, look,
Yeah.
there are a few things when I look at models and I'm like, oh, they've mismolded the Thompson. And it's like, no, that's what the grease gun looks like.
The reason it's called the grease gun because it literally looked like a grease gun.
A grease gun, yeah.
Of the 40s.
Um,
Now it looks more like a caulking gun, but
yes.
there's probably more metal in a modern caulk gun than there was in a grease gun.
I've got one in my shed. Let me go look.
a fully loaded grease gun too. It was, yeah. It's like a lot of people don't realize this, but the Thompson is a stupidly expensive weapon to make. It was effectively a Porsche of the small arms world. It's horrendously expensive.
Well, they still are.
Yeah, but I think it came to the point that even after you got to the A1 version of the Thompson, which was the sort of cheaper, more mass-produced one, you could make 4 grease guns for the price of 1 Thompson and have change left over. Like it's just stupid.
There you go.
Not stupid, just economics.
Yeah. Moving on, the flamethrower team is a flamethrower team. Nothing fancy there.
Yeah, they get the little fancy title, but they're the same.
The light mortar team, nothing super noticeable there, except you can get a veteran paratrooper version, which is 2 men, not 3.
I was going to say one of the biggest. So the light mortar team, the fact that it has to start as a 3-man team is the exception. Most other nations, it's a 2-man team.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, so this is actually a reverse. So they start with the 3, and the paratrooper version is 2, whereas most other people are actually only paying for 2 models. So now, to be fair, I'm fairly sure that most light mortars come in at 35 points. So you're paying 40 for regular, so you're only paying it a little bit extra for the extra guy. But it does mean, ironically, that you lose small team immediately because you start as 3.
I don't understand why. Just because doctrinally speaking, a mortar squad was 6 guys, and that is for the light mortar. So it was 3 ammo carriers, a gunner, assistant gunner, and the squad leader.
I think that's where some of the abstract pieces of bolt action come into play again.
No, I mean, I get that. I get that. Obviously, they're not going to put 6 guys to man 1 mortar because the ammo carriers would be running to and from like platoon supply points, rally points. But why go to 3 for one nation?
Yeah. No, I think that's potentially fair.
Medium mortar, nothing.
Yeah, nothing fancy.
Notable there. Same as the heavy mortar, all the same.
All pretty.
The artillery, nothing super fancy here. I think there is a pack howitzer, but it's just a light artillery. The pack howitzer actually can't get a gun shield. I think later versions of the light howitzer you can get a gun shield.
Yeah, it was put in the FAQ that they were allowed to take one. In the original profile that they put it in, they were like, the gun shield is too small, we're not going to count it. And then they were like, they're calling it a gun shield. It pretty much is a gun shield. Small is irrelevant. Let's have a look at some of the things that are on like the Quad Maxim. It's like this little plate that sits.
It's a gun shield. Gun. It's a gun shield, not a crew shield. It protects the gun, not the crew. Yeah.
We should change all those names.
No, by design. By design, they were all to protect the gun, not the crew. The early German anti-tank gun variants were like these giant things that protected like the crew and battalion headquarters and held the front line. And then later, like the Pack 40 is just this like angled plate that protects the gun, and that's it.
It's severely angled too. It's not like a little flange. It's like almost past 45 degrees. And it's like, no, if you aren't directly behind where the breach is, you're being hit.
Yeah, it's actually also double layered, the Pack 40 gun shield.
Yep.
So the cool thing about the pack howitzer is that it was literally packed. The airborne divisions, when they dropped, had 75 mils parachuted with them, and that was the artillery that they called on. Not necessarily naval batteries and the USAF. I mean, of course, if you could get them, you get them on the horn. But your main thing was the 75 mil div arty, as it was called, divisional arty. Then the medium howitzer and heavy howitzer, nothing super fancy there. All pretty standard stuff. Now comes to what is for me the most disappointing part of the entire US Army, is that they actually included recoilless rifles. Awesome. They're just howitzers.
No special rules.
No special rules. They can also indirect fire, which I'm fairly certain you can't do with a recoilless rifle.
Well, I mean, I'm just looking at it again for any way that I can sort of save
It's
something
also-
out of this.
it's the
But
same points.
It's like exactly what's funnier is like I look at there's a slight difference between the 57 mil M18 because that's the D3, so that's going to be like a 2-inch
1 inch.
or
Yeah.
sorry, 1-inch, 1-inch record, and then the 75 is the 2-inch, and I'm like, so it is sort of a light howitzer with the special rules, but they're actually slightly worse than what a normal light howitzer would be. But it's like, that whole, but I can still fire it indirect, and I'm like,
that's actually a good point. I just realized that they're both considered light howitzers, but they have different profiles. Is that just because the book's old?
No, so the book I've got at the moment, I've actually written in and updated all the FAQ pieces for.
Nice.
They've actually specifically called those pieces out. Sorry, they specifically have left those pieces alone. So it's a 1-inch and a 2-inch, and essentially it's
actually
there is a points difference.
Actually, 30 points for a 1-inch direct fire weapon's not bad,
especially when it can shoot 48.
Yeah, I take that back. The 57's a sleeper.
Yeah,
but do I want that over? Do I want that over a howitzer?
No, of course not.
No.
Look, if you're going for if you're playing towards theme and you put down a recoilless rifle, people who they don't see them that often, they're not going to expect that to be any particularly good. And then when it finally does manage to kill something and they go, wow, how many points is that? And you're going to go, it's only 30. And they're going to go, that's amazing. And you go, not really, because if I took this and I couldn't took a regular howitzer that you've got and that killed 4 or 5 squads.
If the recoilless rifle was in the anti-tank team slot with the bazookas, now we're talking.
Yep.
Yes.
Now we're talking. But also, the recoilless rifle wasn't even. I think they were like experimentally deployed after Operation Varsity, which would have been April 45. And actually, I think it was 82nd Airborne that got recoilless rifles, and that's it. I know they were a much bigger thing in Korea in post World War II, but yeah, I actually don't think they were used really. So. That's a shame.
It does.
They should be in the anti-tank slot. If they're in the anti-tank slot, I'd get one every game, 100%. Stuff the bazooka team. Give me a recoilless rifle.
Well, another way of getting HE, right?
Well, not only that, but recoilless rifles are cool. I love recoilless rifles.
Then this changed very quickly from this is trash.
Be open-minded. This. No, it is trash because of the slot that it's in. If it was in the anti-tank slot,
move to gun buyer advice now as opposed to just book review.
Multi-launcher is just a multi-launcher. Nothing fancy about it.
You say just a multi-launcher. I mean, it's a 4-man team multi-launcher.
Oh, we're back onto the weird team sizes for the US.
And I'm like, so for 65 points, you get 4.
Yeah, that's the same
crew.
That's the same as the Nebel. Same points, same men.
Oh, is it? I thought the Nebel was more expensive.
No, 65. That's all you do. Because I've been playing them a lot.
And then got the anti-aircraft gun. You got the 37mm heavy autocannon. It's pretty standard there. Team weapon fixed flank. It's fixed, which is a bit lame. You don't have the rotating carriage that you do like in a lot of other
with
AA guns. 90mm M2 dual purpose AT gun. Pretty cool. Except it's horrendously expensive. Like vomit inducing expensive. The regular is 185 points for a 5-man super heavy anti-tank gun with flak.
I thought you were going to say with fixed.
And flak.
Yeah. But I mean, how much is the 88? The German 88?
Oh, it's a little bit more. I'll have to look into it, but I know it's 7 men.
I think I think it's like, I thought it was like 200 something.
Yeah,
I didn't realize
it's
the 88 was that expensive.
It's slightly less than your medium tanks, but
Right.
you do have that 7 wounds.
So basically, this
it's
is
indirect.
yeah.
And again, indirect, yeah, that's true. And
Yeah.
fire smoke.
Yeah,
It's a
this
good
thing
one.
isn't indirect; it's only direct.
Hey, 185 for super heavy doesn't sound too bad with 5 wounds.
Sounds
Look, I mean, it's going to put a
god
hole in a
awful.
target tank, right?
Yeah.
So basically,
I mean,
that's
that
the
gets you,
US.
that gets you a 400-point differential right there if you kill a target tank.
That's the US answer to the flak 88. It seems.
Yeah.
Anti-tank gun, standard stuff. You get a light and a medium. Yeah. So this is 3757 and the 3-inch.
Yeah. It's just hidden behind all the flavor text that they pushed it over to the next page with.
So moving on to light tanks. Now we get to the cheese wagons that everybody hates.
Let's not mislabel it that quickly.
It's a brie wagon, or is it stinkier than that?
I'm thinking
it-
blue vein.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Basically,
Disgusting.
Aged over time and every kind of wrong possible.
so there's a whole bunch of different variants of the M3 Stuart. Some with recce, some without recce. Most of them can be. I think they actually changed it now with recent FAQ, so all of them can have
Some with
recce.
flamers.
The one with the flamer is turret mounted flamer, which is good. It's not hull mounted, so you don't also get the coaxial. That one can't have recce, so everybody take a deep breath. The cheese wagon of everybody's concern is actually, I think, in the FAQ, which has. Wait, is the M3 cheese wagon gyro stabilized as well? no, it's not. No, it's the A1.
No.
The A1 is
it's not.
gyro stabilized.
Yeah.
Deep breath.
Yeah.
So the M3 has a turret light anti-tank gun, which is fine. A coaxial machine gun, which is also fine. You can get a pintle machine gun, which is also fine. You can also get a hull-mounted machine gun. You're thinking 15 machine gun shots with recce? Yeah, it's a bit annoying, but that's not too bad. But it also gets 2 hull-mounted LMGs. So now you're talking, what is that, 23 shots? Of 23 machine gun shots on a light tank with recce.
How many points are we looking at here?
Yes. What did you say? Sub 150?
Yeah.
I think it
Regular.
I think it might clock in just a little bit more.
And importantly, you're getting a recce vehicle in the tank slot, so you can still get an armored car with one if you needed.
Yeah. The American armored cars are terrible. 155 points. 155 points.
That is nice.
23 shots with recce. It's disgusting. So that is the cheese wagon of cheese wagon fame.
Would note, if you're taking that particular cheese wagon with recce, you are cutting some losses on the number of shots you'll get. So most of the time when I see the cheese wagon lists across the net or whatever, they actually don't take the recce because they want to be firing those guns, not running away.
Yeah.
So now there's a cost associated with that, of course, if you want both. But that it does mean that they'll be sub 150 if you take the recce out of it.
Yeah, if you take the recce out, it's 145 points.
You can take a platoon of 3, 2 sets of 3 in one of the Western Desert selectors for less than 700.
Ugh. Yeah, so don't do this if you wish to have friends.
Or set up a narrative game, it's fine. You're versing 88s.
So the rest of the Stuarts are all kind of a variation on gyro stabilized light anti-tank gun, not gyro stabilized recce, how many different types of MGs you get and where. So it's pretty straightforward. It's worth noting that before the A3 Stuart, they're all vulnerable, so it's +1 to all side and rear armor shots because they're riveted constructions. Interestingly, the Satan, while actually built on the riveted chassis, doesn't have riveted. It just has internal fuel tanks. So that's the flamethrower.
One half dozen the other.
You imagine if it had both. Good God.
Well, no one would take it then.
The M5 Stuart is a really nice little light tank.
Mhm.
It has a +1 on the front armor, so it actually counts as a medium vehicle on the front armor.
Mhm.
And you have the same number of MMGs as before, and you can whack it. Unfortunately, you can only get a HMG on top, not an MMG, unless they FAQ'd it.
It took me, I think in the FAQ they've modified it slightly, so I've
Yeah.
got so you can have the additional pintle MMG on
Sweet,
top,
yeah.
HMG for 25.
Yeah. Did they also add Recce to the M5?
No,
Okay,
not
interesting.
not in my latest check. So
Yeah, okay.
it's possible that I missed that.
I had the sneaking suspicion that a Stuart variant got Recce in the recent
Mhm.
FAQ.
Yeah, one of them did, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was this one or the others. But
Yeah, we'll have to double check. Now we get to the best tank in the entire American lineup, which is the M20.
it's a pretty cool looking tank.
Which is the M24 Chaffee. It's 150 points regular. Comes with a gyro stabilized medium AT gun. With that is also a 2-inch template. That's one of the other American special rules. Is the medium AT gun is a 2-inch template, not a 1-inch template.
Yeah. On set vehicles.
Yeah. So it's the coax MMG plus the hull-mounted MMG. The light tank can have Recce for 10 points.
Nice.
And you can have a HMG on top. This thing at 160 points is lethal as hell. It's a really small profile. It's a short tank. It's also not a tall tank. And it's also not a wide tank either. It's this tiny little thing. Sorry?
It's quite easy to maneuver.
Yeah. It's this small thing with a medium AT gun and Recce, and if you take it as veteran, it's 190 points, 200 with Recce, and it's gyro stabilized main gun. It is a disgusting tank destroyer. And if the tank's dead, you're not like, oh no, I've only got my machine guns. You're still slinging 2-inch HE all day.
Yep.
This is one of those.
Nice.
Yeah, it's one of those things where if you're going competitive, it's really hard to go past the Chaffee, really hard to go past the Cheese Wagon, and really hard to go past a whole bunch of U.S. Marines. The Cheese Wagon or the Chaffee depends on what you think you're coming up against, really.
Do you need board control pin suppression, or do you need anti-tank and the ability to have something a little bit more survivable than a...
Hilariously, one of the things I forgot to mention about the Cheese Wagon is that you can fire the MMG and the LMG at one target and all of the turret-mounted MGs on another target. So it's 13 and 10.
That was a change in the FAQ to put that restriction in place for the hull mount guns.
Yeah.
So the 2 light machine guns and the hull mount medium machine gun all have to shoot the same target.
Yeah.
Every other weapon still is bound by the same things, can shoot wherever. So your pintle can shoot 180 degrees, your turret can shoot 75 degrees off in the distance or whatever. But yeah, prior to that, they all could target something separate. So it was, so in that list of potentially 6 of them, you could do
12 pins,
like 30 pins, and just not pin out, but just put pins across the entire opponent force.
Who needs an air observer when you can do that? Oh,
you just put the air observer on top.
Now comes the ugly stepchild of the US tanks,
Sherman.
It's the M3.
No,
Jacob.
It is not. You wash your mouth out, Jacob. It is not the Sherman.
No.
It's the M3 Lee Grant. It's a fun little vehicle. You have a turret-mounted gyro-stabilized. No, sorry. Why does the... Okay, now, put this tank in the bin. Why does it have a gyro stabilizer? The M3s didn't have gyro stabilizers. Anyways, you have a turret-mounted gyro stabilized anti-tank gun and a hull-mounted medium anti-tank gun.
A lot of these options don't allow you to take veterans.
Yes. Now it's even twice as absurd. So you have all of these Lees and Grants. I think the A5 you can take as veteran.
Yep.
And then whack on top that they're all vulnerable because they're riveted construction, or they easily catch fire. And bristling with MGs as well. I think you have...
Few.
I've only got 2.
Is it... So I think this version has 2. Let me check what most of our books
I know
are
the
here.
very early design had 2 hull-mounted LMGs as well, same as the Stuart.
Mhm.
I know it got deleted pretty early, but I think some vehicles were shipped with it.
Yeah, I don't know if that's necessarily. I can't see that reflected.
Yeah,
But there's
So
also
with
there's
with
also
these,
an ish version.
yeah, yeah.
so with these vehicles, what's the thought process behind having the medium and the light anti-tank?
In terms of design,
Yeah.
look, honestly, this is a we were talking about this before the call. This is one of those examples of like band-aid solutions for US
Mhm.
tanks. Also with the tank destroyers, which we will get to. They had the M3 that had a 37 mil gun. The Spanish Civil War happened, and they went, 37 mil's not really going to cut it. We need to whack a 75 on it. Where the hell are we going to do it? And so they just literally whacked the 75 in the hull. It was very much, it didn't just, I don't know, I think there was an M2 medium, which didn't have the 75, and that was the design that the M3 medium was based off. But the M3, so the M2 would have been an interwar design. And then the M3 was like, shit, World War II starting, we need a tank. The Sherman's not yet ready. Or the M4's not yet ready. Let's get the Lee and the Grant in field. And that's just because when it came to Panzer IIIs, 37 mil's not really going to cut it, which is also what the early Panzer IIIs were equipped with. But that was kind of like invasion of Poland.
The progression was already happening, right?
Yeah,
and Germany at that time, it was already researching and putting into production the new guns that were coming through the pipeline.
Yeah, yeah. So I think they had the 50 mils by the time we went to North Africa on the Panzer IIIs. The early variants of the 4s were coming through with the 75 shorts for the howitzer. And also, I mean, nobody really knew this, but the Tiger slipped in right into Tunisia at the very end. So there's one that's knocked out, and I actually think that Tiger is at Bovington. The one that the British knocked out in Tunisia is actually in Bovington. So once the borders are open, quick trip to Bovington to go see that one.
Quick.
It's going to go in the blink of an eye. I'll be swept out of Bovington in a few decades, and I'll be like, it's only been a few hours, please.
2 trips then.
Yeah, and then the Lee's super expensive. For all of the other stuff that's in there, don't get the Lee. You can shoot at 2 different vehicles. Like thematically, fine. If you're expecting to come up against a lot of armor, yeah, fine, maybe. Just get an anti-tank gun.
It's a good themed tank, just like a lot of these. So, like, and again, from an aesthetic point of view, it's a very interesting design and how they, did it and engineered it.
It's ugly as sin, Dan.
Some say just quirky, but I do think that when if you're building your list around a specific engagement and they were present, then yeah, sure, take one. If you're building your list because you want to put something in that's good bang for buck, it's pretty hard for the Lee to cut the mustard against some of the other things
that we've already talked about. Let alone what's coming up next, which is the greatest tank that was ever designed ever in the history of ever.
E-34.
M4 Sherman. It actually was usable by its crew, unlike the T-34.
I hear that when you sent yours over, we had to modify them.
The Soviets did not. I don't even think the Soviets kept any of their own designs unmodified.
No, they didn't like anything that they had to Russianize it when it came across. It was never allowed to stay the same. I'm pretty sure that was a rule.
Even the Spitfires. Oh, actually, no. I think the stupid amounts of half-ton trucks that got the 2-ton trucks that got sent over. So base Sherman has 2 things that are based entirely in myth and not actually factual. It easily catches fire in thin sides. It's just not true. The side armor of a Sherman is equivalent to the front armor of a Panzer III, and you don't see a Panzer III with a thin front special rule, do you?
No, you don't.
And the burn rate of a Panzer IV, of a Sherman was actually the equivalent of Panzer IIIs and Panzer IVs and Panthers in Western Europe. So it's not a thing. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. So it's a 185 points gyro stabilized medium AT gun and a couple of MGs. Nothing super fancy there. There's a whole bunch of different Sherman variants in the book. And they vary between whether they have thin sides or you can cancel it and easily catches fire and all the other stuff. Then you get to the 76 Sherman, which has a heavy anti-tank gun, which is a really nice thing to have on gyro stabilized. But now you're talking about 292 points, which is for a gyro stabilized heavy anti-tank gun on a medium chassis. Disgusting. You can also get, I think,
a good way.
Yeah, not in a good way. Not in a cheese wagon way. Disgusting. You can also get, I think, the only heavy tank. Oh no, sorry, the Pershing is in here. One of your heavy tanks is the Jumbo, which is just an Armored 10 Sherman that is slow.
That's well priced.
Well, it's slow and easily catches fire. For 265 points.
I think that the one thing that always sort of puts me off with the Jumbo is that it still only has the medium
gun.
You can upgrade it.
You can upgrade it, but I'd prefer to just not upgrade it and just get it. But they're there. They were up.
You're getting into Panther territory for the price.
300
Obviously,
points.
Panther's a damage of 9, but still.
Yeah. And then now comes probably the best Sherman in bolt action terms. It's the 105 howitzer.
Your favorites.
Well, it's actually just a really good buy because it has thin sides and it has easily catches fire. You can cancel the thin sides for 10 points. I wouldn't. I actually wouldn't.
It's easy enough to protect your side armor generally.
Pretty much. As a general rule of thumb, I wouldn't cancel thin sides ever on any vehicle. If I had 10 spare points, I'd get more SMGs every damn day of the week. And that's assuming I've already bought max BARs, because why the hell wouldn't you?
Possibly if I was running tank platoons, knowing that I was then going to fight tank platoons, then I might consider cancelling.
Yeah, because you end up with like really weird point breaks, right? In a tank platoon, yeah, fair enough. So standard amount of MMGs, but you get the turret-mounted gyro-stabilized medium howitzer, which is schmick.
Awesome.
For 220 points, gyro-stabilized medium howitzer. That is filthy in all of the right ways. And you can get a version that doesn't have the thin sides and doesn't easily catch fire. But now you're looking at 244 points. If you've got some weird point breaks, maybe, but I wouldn't build the list around it. Now you get to probably one of the worst point sinks in the book, with the exception of the Lee. Is the M4 Sherman Calliope. It's
man.
M4 Sherman with a multi-launcher strapped to the top of it. Cool as hell, but the problem is it has a busy turret special rule, which means you either fire the turret or you fire the multi-launcher. And fair enough, I would think.
Do you know one of the reasons that I really like this particular unit? First of all, it's a move and fire multi-launcher, and you both know how much I love those.
The Panzerwerfer was way better, though.
The Katyusha is better than the Panzerwerfer, but this is hideously expensive compared to the Katyusha. But the difference is it's also armor 9, which my Katyusha is not.
Hilariously, I think you can fire the hull-mounted MMG when you do the multi-launcher. So that's
restrictions
nice.
on the turret weapons.
Then
what's nice is you can fire. You still have to declare your weapons up front, obviously, but you can fire the machine gun after the multi-launcher. So you can go, I know the machine gun is going to hit that unit. And if the multi-launcher happens to clear it out, you can go, well, I guess I don't have to worry about firing it anyway.
I love it how the only defense you have for it is sometimes you have to play a little less bolt action. The Zippo Crocodile. So the Zippo has internal fuel tanks. The Crocodile is towing the fuel tanks, but it still has the internal volatile special rule, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's still across. It's essentially still a flamer tank, and so it still gets the potential that something goes bang.
Yeah, look, whatever. Those are the rules. It's a 175 tire mounted flamethrower, coaxial MMG, hull mounted MMG, armor 9. Not bad. 175
Mm.
points.
It's not bad at all.
I would say don't take the trailer.
Yeah.
Because
Kick. That 10 points is worth it.
you need the movement. You need the extra 3 inches.
Yeah.
Because you lose 3
Yeah.
inches if you go for the trailer.
See, it depends, right? Like there is certain situations within. Yeah, gosh, it's like you're
No, it
crazy.
doesn't.
No, because I think right. There's certain situations that it doesn't say you can't run, it just restricts your run. So my first thought would be that your first 2 turns of the game, you actually just run for position, then you only need 6 inches because you've got a flamethrower, right? So you're closing down on infantry. You don't need to chase vehicles.
Yeah. But
Um,
if you're going to
but-
spend your first 2 turns running, it's 24 inches versus 36.
yeah, no, I suppose that's fair.
And you also don't get the pivot.
That is true. Although if you could start on a road, then it makes really no difference at all.
Yeah. But yes,
But
during your list
Everyone on the
building,
internet should know that starting on a road is bad for a vehicle.
during list building, you're going to know that you're going to start on a road.
I'm a TO, I know everything.
So now we get to the real colorful side of US armor, which is the LVT. I think more
we're
of
missing
these.
a Pershing here, man.
Oh, sorry. It's a heavy tank.
Is that because
Rest in peace, Wayne.
is that
I
Let's not
don't
talk
believe
about that.
I don't believe heavy tanks exist in bolt action.
Well, I mean, this one only really came into the game for 1945. The war was pretty much done.
Yeah.
They see a lot more action in Korea.
Yeah. It's a 395 point regular heavy tank with a super heavy anti-tank gun.
Still not as expensive as a Tiger.
Oh, I think it's about right.
You'd always take a Tiger as a veteran.
Isn't Tiger 555 regular and 666
I
veteran?
think you're thinking that's
It's
like
definitely
that's a
666
King
veteran.
Tiger. I'm pretty sure.
We can
I think
find out later.
I think a regular Tiger is spot on for these points. To be honest.
Oh, fair enough. It's got the same stats.
Yeah, just Tiger Fear as well.
So the LVT is the landing vehicle, tank of the U.S. Marine Corps. It's 150 points regular, turret-mounted light anti-tank gun, coaxial HMG, and 2 pintle-mounted MMGs with 360 arc. It's only an armor 7, but it's a really fun little vehicle. You can exchange the light AT gun and coaxial for a flamethrower for free. So this thing is, for 150 points, you get 2 MMGs and a flamethrower and an armor 7. It's kind of hard to move past this vehicle.
Yeah.
Has my favorite vehicle rule out of all bolt action across all of the different nations that have this rule in particular, which is amphibious. Because the amount of effort it takes generally to set up a water feature for your tank to use that rule can cost as much as buying a model of this vehicle to use it on. I'm talking obviously a terrain feature of significant quality to be like, wow, that looks amazing. I want to use this rule.
Now we get to the super janky vehicles.
Ooh.
Super underappreciated.
You mean these weren't?
No. We're about to get seriously janky now. So, like, leading into World War II, the US is like, man, we don't really have tank destroyers. We have some anti-tank guns. And they tried this towed anti-tank gun thing during, like, maneuvers and stuff. And they were like, it's not as good as, like, a tank destroyer. And so they were like, all right, what have we got? And what can we bodge together? And one of their first designs was the M3 gun motor carriage. They had a whole bunch of half tracks and a whole bunch of 75 mils. And they literally just went, so much so that there is actually, I think in the early versions of this half track, there wasn't a connection between the actually no, in no versions of the hard track is there any connection between the engine and the drive components and the gun. So it's literally just an artillery gun that's been bolted onto the back of a half track. And the chairs are like steel plates with a hinge and a spring that fold out, and you just sit on the steel plate. Like, that's all that is. And it gets even better because
Nothing bad can go wrong from that.
the 75mm gun that's in it is not the 75mm anti-tank gun or the gun that's in the Sherman.
Yeah.
It's an 1895 French 75mm howitzer. Literally a 20th century gun. So much so that I actually think that the firing mechanism wasn't a button or a solenoid or a lever like it was in a lot of the other designs. I'm pretty sure it's actually still a drawstring.
Pull cord. Yeah, I thought it was still a pull cord. Yeah.
The last final feature that I love about this half track is that it doesn't have a windshield, because if you had a windshield, it would just explode into a million pieces when you fired the gun. So you, as the crew who sits in front of it, you literally have to like put up the metal cover and like hunker down and close your ears when the cannon fires, because you're about this far from the muzzle. It's 120 points, forward-facing medium anti-tank gun.
Pretty good.
2-inch template. What else do you need? The in later selectors and the USD day, the Ranger company selection can actually bring 3 of these. As long as you have 3, it's 1-for-1 with a Ranger squad to a maximum of 3. It's disgusting.
That is amazing.
And then
plus you've got Rangers.
Yeah. And then you get to the biggest like Band-Aid bodge design, which is quite literally a mass-produced technical. They had the Dodge 3/4 ton truck, which is also known as a weapons carrier. This is basically, as Australians know it, a ute. It's a World War II ute. It's a car with a flatbed on the back of it. You can't carry too much heavy stuff, but you can fit like 6 or 8 people in the back. They slapped the 37mm anti-tank on that bed and pointed it rearwards. It is, as we know it, a World War II technical, and that is the most beautiful thing that I've ever seen in my life.
I mean, some of these obviously, they talk about it being just deployed in Tunisia and out in the desert way, and there was a lot of that sort of stuff happening out in North Africa because it was reverse.
Oh shit! We need tank destroyers.
Reverse up to preset ranges. We know we've marked where things are hitting to do whatever, so we know we can just. But as soon as we fire, you get us out of here.
It's a shoot and scoot doctrine for sure. Shoot and scoot. Then came the first tank destroyer that people identify as a tank destroyer, which is the M10, which is actually also a Band-Aid design, which a lot of people don't realize. They had plenty of Sherman hulls. They had bigger cannons, which is a 3-inch gun. And they couldn't fit it in the turret. So they kind of chopped the roof off the turret. Part of it was they couldn't fit the gun. The other part was you wanted greater visibility. A tank destroyer is an ambushing vehicle. So you're supposed to sit in a spot, and so open top gives you much better visibility with binoculars and stuff. So you can spot the enemy tank sooner. And then also because it was too slow, they just got rid of most of the armor that was on the hull. And it was still too slow, and they said, well, okay, now it's probably, it doesn't have any armor, and it's also really slow, so you kind of lose anyway. So they just they bolted some slanted armor just to give it a bit more protection, but not much. And a giant counterweight on the back of the turret, which is what the big tail is that you see on the M10 turrets. 155 points regular, heavy AT gun, armor 7, can be recce for 10 points.
Yep, I like it.
Number 7. I've got it as number 8.
Oh, maybe it was FAQ'd. Oh, no,
I haven't written that one in.
Oh, sorry. No, I'm reading the wrong page. 180 points regular, armor 8.
Yep.
No recce on that one, sorry. I was reading the page.
I was going to say, you're looking at Hellcat.
I am. And you can add a HMG for 25 points. Don't take this tank destroyer.
Open topped is unfortunately too much of a liability.
It's also too expensive. The M18, however, which is much better, was 155, armor 7 with recce. And heavy anti-tank gun. Really good buy. I'd still get the Chaffee over this.
Okay.
I think that's fair.
It has slightly higher armor value, has the recce. Yeah, you don't have a heavy anti-tank gun, but you have more machine guns.
And you're also not open-topped.
Yeah. It is also actually the M18 is the Hellcat is the Chaffee version of the M10. So the M10 is we have Shermans, let's turn them into tank destroyers. The M18 is we have Chaffees, let's turn them into tank destroyers. And then lastly, you've got the M36 Jackson, which is an M10 with a super heavy anti-tank gun. Open top, 255 points regular. See you later. And then you can get the M36B1 Jackson, which is a super heavy anti-tank gun version for a difficult pill to swallow, 305 points. Yeah.
But it's got the medium.
Look, yeah,
medium
look, you get the medium machine gun. Yeah, that comes with it.
armor.
I'm a bad salesman.
Not worth it. The
What about the Pintle Mount HMG for 25? Would you take 25?
Self-propelled artillery has some nice picks, but
Yeah,
they're difficult.
including the revised T112.
Is that in there?
Yeah, it goes through becomes the T30, and they change the gun over. It's the one from Kelly's Heroes.
Oh, right. Sorry. Yeah. I'm with you. The M8 Scott, which is a really unknown tank. It's a Stuart with a light howitzer and an open top.
Yeah.
It's a really cute little vehicle. It looks like it's got a little tank snub nose revolver. And it's this really short and tall package. It's cute as hell for a tank.
It's still 140 points.
Yeah. But hey, it comes with the HMG.
Wow.
It's pintle mounted HMG. Yeah, you still pay the points, but you don't have to pay it separately, so it feels a bit better. M7 Priest, open top, case mounted medium howitzer, for 160 points. I think the M4 Sherman's a better buy. The 105 mil Sherman is definitely a better buy. The M12 gun motor carriage is a heavy howitzer, armor 8. You can replace the heavy howitzer with a HMG, reducing its cost by 85 points.
Now, Gorchin. Have you never looked at that, Gorchin?
No, I have. It just cracks me up every time. So why would you do this?
I honestly had thought at some point that this might have been a typo and they actually meant replace it with like a flak mounting or something.
No, no, it's a cargo vehicle.
It remains a single, take the howitzer and go, you know what, we don't want that howitzer.
It's a 95 point light tank open top with a HMG. Just don't.
Fantastic.
Look,
don't do this.
Look, it is a light tank, which means that you can ram and run things over.
Don't do this. If you do this, I will yeet your M12 gun motor carriage if I see it at a tournament.
Well, again, theme-wise and aesthetics that you want, do whatever you want.
Nah.
You know what? If I'm a TO, I will specifically stipulate that the HMG version of this is banned, and I'm not going to explain it.
Forget everything else that's been discussed in the last 6 months. It's like this vehicle. That's it.
And then it'll be followed by, don't ask me if you can take rifle grenades.
Oh dear. Hey, if aesthetics theme, sure, do it. Not a good point investment. I think that's the clear summary.
No.
Don't replace the howitzer.
So there's the M40 is the heavy howitzer that's vulnerable.
Yeah.
Light tank. Then you've got the T30, which is the light howitzer on an armored carrier.
Yeah, and that's the one I think is from Kelly's Heroes.
Yeah, it's a good little buy, this one.
Yeah, I like it. I like it a lot. 100 points.
100 points, open top, light howitzer.
Yep.
17. Yep, nice. Then you've got the medium howitzer version of the half track.
Yep.
Which has gone through before. It's actually a little bit 120 points. Same points.
Pretty close to the same points.
Yeah. And then you've got mortar carriers, which are pretty ubiquitous.
Well, yeah. The thing is, like, so when I look at it, yes, you could have a move and fire mortar, and there's benefit in that. But does that really stand up to the other things that we've discussed, like the Chaffee, the M4? I mean,
It is.
it's
I
cheap.
was about to say
It's cheap. I'll give it cheap.
I was about to say it is 95 points, but I would rather just take the 100-point light howitzer.
I mean, you do get for your 95 points, you do get the medium mortar plus an HMG, so
True.
technically you can spread some pins around and do some shots. But I mean, you still can't direct fire that mortar, right? Like, you're gonna miss with the mortar, and then you've only got 3 shots, so you've spent 95 points. We're back at a foot-mounted HMG cost almost at that point.
Yeah, and then you
paid 20 points to drive around and shoot backwards.
You got the LVT A4, which is a nice little buy. 125 points, light howitzer on the open turret, and pin-mounted HMG on the turret. So it's not too bad. I'd probably take the other LVT any day of the week, but if you need some howitzer, it's a good little buy.
Yeah.
Now comes a hilariously popular pick. Is the not this one. This is the budget pick. It's the M13 gun motor carriage.
This one's the slightly nicer one.
Two HMGs on a half track is basically all that it is. You can slap on an extra MMG for the rear arc for 95 points. If you're going to get one of these, don't get this one. The M15.
I mean, not 95 points for, a move and flyer flak, isn't too. I mean, it's if the HMGs again, if they got an overall game buff to like 4 or 5 shots or whatever, then suddenly this becomes very, very good.
But not as good as the other one.
Of course not.
The M15, I actually really like this vehicle, and I don't think it's popular enough. It's an automatic 37mm and 2 HMGs. Really, really good.
Can you imagine if those HMGs did get the buff of shots? You go, ooh, this is now really nice.
This thing will shred any any armored carrier or transport. It will just chew it up.
Yeah.
Now we get to the other cheese wagon. Which is
meat chopper.
Yeah, exactly. 125 points. Quad HMG is the M16 multiple gun motor carriage.
Yeah.
Yeah, disgusting bit of kit, this one.
Do you add an MMG?
Do you add a pintle-mounted MMG for the rear arc? I mean, you could.
If I had 15 points to potentially spend, knowing that I could drive the truck largely in reverse for my threat, because you don't have a 36-inch kill box, right? So you'd set yourself up. If I knew that I could face the rear armor as a armored carrier, okay, yes, I'm going to get shot back, and it's not going to be particularly nice. But then it's 5 heavy machine guns firing back. It starts like 15 shots.
4 HMGs and an MMG,
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, 4 HMGs and MMG.
17 shots.
So 17 shots coming back. Yes, I'm shooting out of my rear arc, but I mean...
Yeah. You're a light vehicle anyway.
It's almost the sort of thing... It's almost the sort of thing that you deliberately try to drive it in front of a squad of infantry and then just put it on ambush.
Disgusting. Moving on to armored cars, which is a very small list.
I was going to say, there's only the 2 of them, isn't there?
Yeah, M8 Greyhound, which is 110 points, light AT gun, coaxial MG, and an open turret. You can add an HMG for a 360 arc of fire. It's wrecky. Just don't. If you're going to take an armored car, take the scout car, or take the MMG Jeep.
Yeah,
which is not in this, but take the MMG Jeep if you're going to take an armored car, because I think it's wrecky MMG soft skin. Like, just it's a mobile pillbox. It's a good little buy, that one. M20 scout car. If you're going to get one, don't get the armored car version. Get the transport version. It's recce, open topped, has a pintle HMG in an open turret for 80 points. Not bad, but the scout car is the better buy. The transport scout car.
And this, the only thing with the transport slot is obviously it's a transport, so it suffers all the impacts of being a transport.
Yeah. So the transport is 86 points. Armor 7, obviously.
8 dudes.
Yeah, it can either be recce or transport. Fair enough. Can transport up to 8 men. 8 is the golden number for transports. And it can add 2 pintle MMGs, one for the right and one for the left. So
we're going to see a lot of that as we get into the different half-track variants and stuff. And this is something like I toyed long and hard about trying to figure out, what's the best way to get the use out of those sorts of things. What's the benefit of taking those MGs on the sides and the rear? Or do you simply take the rear plus one side and constantly work on the drive-by premise?
Absolutely.
Well, but the reality is, in order to do that, you have to sacrifice leaving something in those transports to make it work. And it doesn't work for Americans, but for Germans and Soviets, you can take the M3 scout car from Budapest, and when a squad jumps out, you can split it off and leave 2 men behind.
Yeah.
And they automatically count as crew members to mount 2 extra guns.
Yeah, you can do that
and drive them as machine gun wagons.
You can do that in the D-Day selectors.
Yes.
With the armored infantry. All of the half tracks are pretty similar, as Dan said. 8 to 12, depending how many machine guns and that sort of thing. Tricky little roll. The Jeep's a good little, really cheap order dice if you've got 17, 21 points. So this is where, like, if you've got a flamethrower team, just an extra 20-point Jeep. You might use it, you might not, but an extra cheap order dice is really good. The best transport in the game for Americans is the Dodge 3/4-ton truck. This is the Ute that I was talking about earlier.
This is well priced.
Weapons carry. 31 points, carries 8 men. You can slap an MMG on top. This is such a good buy, and it's a cute little vehicle. If you look up photos of guys, they're really popular amongst reenactors because it's kind of this thing where there were so many of these trucks made. All of the ambulances are weapons carriers, all of the ammo trucks, a lot of the troop movements and stuff are these trucks. There was a lot more 3/4-ton trucks than some of the other vehicles that are really popular. And so they're really popular amongst reenactors just to show them off. And as kind of like this piece of history that nobody knows about. And I love seeing photos of reenactors where there's like a guy driving it, a guy navigating it, a guy hanging on the turret on the top, and there's like 8 guys like piled into the back of it, and they're all holding on to each other so none of them fall out. It's the best. It is the best. Then you've got amphibious transports.
Really good price point.
Yeah, 31 points. It's 46 points with an MMG. It is really, really good. For the US, if you combine, get the veteran for 37 points. Slap, it's 6 points, man. It's 6 points. Let's get that one. Get the MMG. Put an 8-man engineer squad in there. See, 8's the magic number. And away you go. I've also seen motorized Marine lists. Marine squads of 8 carried by this thing with a medium Sherman. You end up with like 9 or 10 auto dice at 1,000, 1,250 points, depending on veterancy and regulars and a few other things. You don't need anything else. You don't need your howitzer. You don't need your mortars. You just have so much goddamn firepower and so much mobility.
Gun everything off.
And so much mobility because you just vomit these tough fighters with like 12 shots point blank. And if anything survives, you just assault next turn. It's disgusting. That's one of the meta lists is motorized Marines with a medium Sherman, medium howitzer Sherman. It's very, very popular. The rest of the transports, I love the LVT transports because they can fit like 24 or 30 men in them.
Like, why?
me and Dad have actually played several games.
Or an artillery unit.
Or a single artillery.
Yes. Even a light artillery unit. But me and Dad have played several games like that using those big transports. And it's a great experience, up until something with multiple pins hits that vehicle. And then it's shocking.
Because you could, if you got the water buffalo landing vehicle, 30 men, you could fit your entire platoon in this vehicle.
I did. In one of the games I put everything in the buffalo, and the buffalo was hiding behind some buildings, but I had to get off the board at a certain point. And just as I was crossing the last stretch of road,
With
because I'd been
15
trying
order
to
dice
duck
in this LVT.
into one thing, and but it's open topped, and so Dad just came around the corner with all his different units that he could, and it was just pin city. The buffalo, for some reason, had taken a pin earlier or whatever, so it got pinned out earlier than everything else, and so everything else then was vomited out and basically was forced to go down with, you know, a crazy amount of pins on it. I was like, this isn't going to end well.
Yeah, moral of the story, don't take a transport capacity of 30.
Or if you're going to do that, make sure it's a big enough game where that's not a liability.
Or that would be really cool, is doing a beach landing with a whole bunch of players deploying out of LVTs.
Yeah, that would be very cool.
And
especially that you can bring a gun with it.
Behind the water.
Look, I think that'll round us out. The rest of the book is theater selectors, which we're probably not going to get into. We will do. Yep. I'm sure we will do all of the campaign books as this series continues. But I hope everybody's enjoyed that episode on us reviewing the Armies of USA for Bolt Action. You now know what it takes to be a great US player or a thematic US player. Those are not. That is the Venn diagram. You can be a great and thematic US player, but if you want to win, don't take a grant. Don't fit your entire platoon in an LVT 40. And Alessio Warlord, if you're listening to me, please, from the heart, move the recoilless guns into the anti-tank slot. Please. That's my call to action to you. If that's something that we can get Alessio and Warlord Games to FAQ, that would. I mean, I could just retire Bolt Action and HMG at that point for myself. I'm done. There's nothing more that I could want to achieve.
Really? HMGs? We couldn't do anything about HMGs?
No. That's the joke. Right?
That's getting greedy.
The moment HMGs become useful, our premise is gone. We're dead in the water.
Yeah. As soon as HMG starts to understand value, is that what you're saying? There's a problem?
No, it's so because the unit is useless, we are providing value instead of the unit. The moment the unit has value to deliver under the table, that's it. We're supplanted. We fill that hole in everybody's machine gun slot in their selectors. When they go to the tournament, they see the HMG in the list and they go, one of those days, those boys are gonna get due justice. Yeah, so that's your two call to actions. Make HMGs useful. Get recoilless rifles into the anti-tank gun slot. This was your most recent episode of HMG, whatever number we're up to.
And one more call to action from me. Please write in the comments what nation you want us to cover next. This has been the HMG crew. You can catch us at Western Tabletop on YouTube. You can follow us on Facebook. Either look for Western Tabletop or the Historical and Miniature Gamers podcast. You'll be able to find us on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, all the good places. See you then. This is Jacob.
I'm Daniel.
And I'm Gorchin. See you next time.